story nerd, and welcome back to my channel. It's been a minute, but we're just gonna jump right into it. I recently had a professional editor who worked for Brandon Sanderson, Dan Wells, and plenty of other people, as well as a beta reader who is a writer, just like me, JP Writes, who is not yet agented or published. Both read at least a chunk of my manuscript. I got a 50-page critique from the editor, and the friend read the whole thing and beta read it for me. And so I thought it would be super fun to go through my manuscript and look at the same places and see what the editor said versus what the beta reader said. Because I think a lot of us are like, what's the point of getting an editor? Like, what value can they provide beyond this? Blah, blah, blah. I am going to give a caveat that I will do a video about my experience working with an editor shortly, and she gave me a lot more than the comments that you're seeing in this presentation, this video right now. I'm basically just want to show kind of like what an editor says for the same thing versus what a beta reader says for the same thing. The editor gave me like a 30-page letter talking about like the story, the positioning, the characters, like analysis, suggestions for how to fix things, like plot solutions, all sorts of stuff. My beta reader did not do that. She wrote a ton of really great comments to me, but they're quite different. I thought it would be useful just to show a few snippets side by side. So that is enough explanation. Let's get to it. All right, but here we have, my work says, God damn it. Her face fell, her skin turned pale, her eyes went wide. Then she took off her fake glasses and shoved them, along with her phone and the other items she dropped, back into her purse hastily. Now, I know this is a first draft-ish, 1.5 draft. It's a bit of a run-on wordy sentence. The beta reader said, felt a little lost at the end of this sentence. And the editor said, what kind of purse? This detail can explain how nice the purse is. This is really early on in the story. It's for characterization. So we had my beta reader kind of comment on the grammar there, and the editor say, I want more sensory details, which she has mentioned quite a few times in the manuscript. That is not my number one thing that I am good at. Okay, next. The next bit, so there's a scene where the main character, Lena, has an interaction with her family. And the beta reader's comment was this: I might be reading too much into this, but I'm wondering if this is a pattern of her being cast out, rejected by her family. And the editor said, it's not clear enough what her feelings are about this, meaning her feelings about her family. And it will reveal characterization if we know them. Is it guilt? Does this tie back to how she's at war with music and it controls her? Bring it out with more clarity. So you can see with the beta reader, she's saying, is this a pattern? Am I reading too much into this? And the editor is saying, it isn't clear enough. So you can read I'm not entirely sure in the beta reader's comments, and the editor is saying you should make this clear because it will help the characterization and it will relate overall to the character arc. And yes, that character arc is something that I am continuously working on. We mostly talked about that in our consultation that we had. The next bit, so we come kind of to the end of the introduction, the end of the first two scenes. My beta reader said, you did a great job at getting me that invested so quickly. And the editor said, you have really strong audience integration with only a few characters introduced at the beginning, a strong scene, and relatable characters. So again, similar sentiments, you can see the difference. The next example I want to show is another quote. So in my work, it says, you only have 2 more years at school and you need this summer to gain visibility. The beta reader said, it would have been nice to continue this. She only has 2 more years of school, and then what? Will turning down this opportunity severely damage her chances of employment after graduation? Or does this opportunity mean she can already make connections for a position after she graduates? And the editor said, clarify with one more sentence how that would give her good visibility. So we see the beta reader kind of being a little bit confused and questioning, and then our editor saying, you should do this. And that would basically solve the problem that the beta reader came up with. It didn't always work like that, but in this example, it did. The point where my character's aunt doesn't call her back. And my beta reader's point is this. I felt like Emily would call her back. While her mom is asleep, it's only a 1-hour time difference for Emily, who's expecting her niece to arrive in a couple of hours. And then the editor says, pretty much the same thing, depending on where her aunt is, it seems like she would logically call her aunt, who's in a closer time zone if she's in Europe, or at least expect a response back. If her aunt really was a mentor figure, she would naturally be the first person she'd turn to for help. If you like this video, remember to give it a like and subscribe. Now we're gonna get into some less specific examples and talk more about overarching things. So I will go to, in my work, the comments about the turning or the midpoint. My beta reader said, from here I was so much more engaged with the story because there were real stakes. The challenge is that this is more than halfway through the book. If there's some way to have this threat or something similar early in the story, it will make all the earlier stuff so much more compelling. And I will say that this is a beta reader who is a writer, and so at times she really gets into critique partner mode. She's an amazing beta reader. My editor said, this is the point where things really become clarified. It might be better if they fall into the trap at the beginning and overhear this conversation at that point, to know the stakes and then have a reactionary goal that is more solid. This area can then have a stronger scene goal rather than just gathering intelligence. They're both saying the same thing, right? That turning midpoint needs to come earlier because it needs to get people engaged earlier. We had it kind of from the reader perspective and we had it from the editor perspective of things are clarified, here is what you can do, and this is why you should do it. Here are even more reasons why you should do it with the reactionary goal, etc., etc. Then we have the plot. So, the overall plot. My beta reader said, I felt like the motivations for much of the plot weren't clear. Ooh, I mean, we're just going to ignore the things. I'm working it out. For the first part of the book, we don't really have any idea what's going on. In chapter 15, there's a conversation with the crew where we start to get some context and different potential threats are discussed, but it felt a little convoluted to me, which is super fair. The editor said, the biggest problem is that the premise and main character goal are revealed too late to the reader within the story. This can be a big rejection point, not only for gatekeepers, but for readers as well, as that is the biggest hook for a reader to continue a story. With these inciting incidents, Lena is not proactive. She is being pushed around into each event. If you have more than 3 inciting incidents, the story loses focus for the reader, and it's unclear exactly where the story begins. That was a really good point. I think that was the major thing that I took away from the two of them. I knew that my beta reader said, hey, there was this point where it lagged, and I knew that I was like, okay, I need to get the tension, and I need to clarify things a bit earlier. What my editor said, though, was that the premise needs to come earlier. She showed me how I have multiple inciting incidents in my edit letter, and that was useful for me, and helped me figure out kind of how to fix the problem that the beta reader felt and kind of knew, like, could throw out a couple of suggestions, but then the editor was like, okay, this is how we fix it. Here's how you could move your premise forward. Or make your premise more clear. Here's how you can get the question there right from the beginning. And that was incredibly, incredibly valuable. The next one is the climactic scene. My beta reader said, this was my favorite part of the book. I felt like everything had been building up to this moment with Lena and Maisie and the violin. And the editor scene, read this? The editor said, read this, and it's a great scene. So you can see kind of where they both come in. We really approach it as an editor from like an editorial standpoint of like, okay, this is a great scene. Whereas here with the reader, we have more of an emotional reaction. And then finally, we have humor. The beta reader said, I think one of your greatest strengths is your sense of humor. There were so many moments where I laughed or smiled throughout the book, and nearly all of them felt completely natural and flowed with the story. And the editor said, small moments of humor that matches the lighter tone. So you see similar sentiments, different wording. And I think, not to say that that's that everything that my beta reader said, my editor said, that's not true at all, actually. The editor gave me so much more in terms of suggestions and things. My beta reader was also incredibly valuable in terms of getting really, she read the whole manuscript too, so she really got deep in telling me things about the characters, etc., etc., etc. So I hope this is kind of helpful if you're thinking, do I need an editor? Do I need beta readers? Or at least, what's the difference, to kind of see a glimpse into it? If this feels like you're just like seeing the tip of an iceberg and you want to hear more about my experience and the difference between them, I can make more videos about that as well. I got another beta reader's feedback recently, and I'm a beta reader myself, doing it all the time. So I think that there's a lot more to talk about here. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.